Hello, everyone. So excited to be here today. Thanks, Ryan and the whole Mosayeri team for organizing such a great conference. As Ryan mentioned, the cross-chain future, and then multi-chain liquidity has been a huge topic of conversation throughout this whole conference. And in this panel, we're going to hone in on Bitcoin and talk about the different approaches that the teams that you're representing here have taken. So before we get into those approaches, it'd be great if each of you could just start off, give us a quick intro, talk about which project that you're working on or have worked on as it relates to Bitcoin in a multi-chain future. Let's start with Muneeb, maybe.
Sure. I'm Muneeb. I'm the founder of Stacks. You should think of Stacks as smart contracts for Bitcoin. As we all know, Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts, and we've been trying to kind of tackle that challenge for a while. Like, the interesting thing about Bitcoin is obviously it has such a large market cap, it has such a large community, such a big brand name, but it comes with certain limitations because you can't change the base Bitcoin layer. So we've been able to build a separate layer for smart contracts that's called Stacks. And it has consensus between the main Bitcoin chain and the Stacks chain. So the Mainnet went live in January of this year, and over the last 6 months, we've been very excited to see developers build all sorts of stable coins, automated market makers, even Bitcoin NFTs, and every other day these days, I'm seeing a new type of a Bitcoin NFT launch. So that's been very satisfying to see.
My name is James Prestwich. I'm currently a protocol developer at cLabs, working on the Celo ecosystem. My background, getting into this, I started working on cross-chain protocols in 2017 and contributed to atomic swap libraries, Bitcoin tooling in Python, Rust, and Solidity, working on Bitcoin relays in Solidity, taking Bitcoin headers, putting them on the Ethereum blockchain, and kind of novel cross-chain instruments. Today I work on mostly EVM to EVM interoperability and contribute to TBTC, which is a wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum.
My name is Mosayeri. I'm a product manager at BitGo. The product that I work on is called Wrapped Bitcoin, or WBTC. It's the first and largest tokenized Bitcoin. I think more than 1% of all of Bitcoin circulating supply is currently locked in WBTC, and it's being widely used on Ethereum. It's also been ported over to Arbitrum, Optimism, Avalanche, and Polygon as well. Very excited to be here with you guys, and congrats on the acquisition, congrats on the launch.
So the next question that I want to ask is, why is this important to you? Why is the market interested in accessing Bitcoin in other layer 1 environments? And then Muneeb, in your case, specifically to Stacks, at least initially, why are people looking to lock up their Bitcoin to access smart contracts on Stacks?
Sure, maybe I can take a stab at it. I think the way I look at this is, forget about Bitcoin being kind of the oldest chain out there, or the one that has been tried and tested. If you look at the money layer for the internet, or even kind of a reserve currency of the world in the future, there are certain really nice properties you have in Bitcoin that you would want to have in something that becomes a reserve currency of the world, right? The way it was launched with the mining-only launch, a very kind of a grassroots type of a movement around it, and things it's designed to be durable and hard to change. So everyone knows that what the supply of Bitcoin is. Everyone kind of knows that aren't going to be a lot of drastic changes to the core protocol of Bitcoin, which is something that is actually counterintuitive, right? In Silicon Valley, people would get excited about things that are rapidly evolving, or you're rapidly kind of iterating over them and trying to build better versions of it. Whereas Bitcoin is something that is actually counterintuitive. It is durable and stable, and it derives its value from that, right? So it's a really great decentralized money layer, And people see it as a store of value. People see it as something where if there is going to be any digital store of value, Bitcoin is probably going to be right up there as the number one asset. And all of the interesting activities that we're seeing where people are issuing Bitcoin derived assets, like their wrapped Bitcoin or some sort of other derivatives of Bitcoin, because people want to use kind of like the almost like the peg to the Bitcoin's price and the link to the Bitcoin economy, and then use it in smart contracts. So I think we just heard a great stat that something like 1% of Bitcoin is issued as wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum. That's like mind-boggling, right? Like that would be, I don't know, $7 billion or maybe $10 billion. I'm always off like how quickly the price appreciates here. But interestingly, where Stacks comes in is the other side of it. That yes, we have 1% of Bitcoin issued on other chains. Why can't we bring smart contracts to Bitcoin instead, right? And let native Bitcoin, like you won't even have to move your Bitcoin to another layer. You can actually just use native Bitcoin for swaps, for lending, for all sorts of applications that people are excited about, right? So it's a little bit like, in some ways, our work is very complementary to what BitGo is doing, because they're enabling the asset to be issued on other chains, and we are the inverse of that. We are bringing the smart contract functionality directly to Bitcoin.
Great. And yeah, from your perspectives, why is it important to do the reverse of what Stacks is doing, to bring Bitcoin to other chains?
Well, because you can't bring smart contracts to the Bitcoin base layer, you're kind of forced to bring your Bitcoin to wherever the smart contracts is, to put it under control of some entity that is participating in those smart contracts for you. Whether that's giving 1% of all Bitcoin in existence to BitGo, or whether that's going off to the Stacks blockchain or taking it to Ethereum via a crypto economic security model. What we're trying to do is take the value that we have in Bitcoin and go out and participate in a broader economy. Go out and participate in the growth that is happening in DeFi and in these other protocols. Bitcoin is, for a blockchain, relatively siloed, and we'd like to take that value that we have, that we're like passionate about, and move it to places where we can do interesting things. For me, it's always been about providing accessible financial services to more people, and that is much easier to do on Ethereum than it is on Bitcoin today.
It's kind of go off of what Muneeb was talking about. I think Bitcoin fundamentally has an approach where you want to move slow. It's not the Silicon Valley culture. And Ethereum, in contrast, has this culture of moving really fast, developing really fast. And we've seen kind of the results of the progress on the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. So it was really important for us when we were looking at this emerging space in 2018 for Bitcoin to be represented in Ethereum's DeFi ecosystem since day one. And that was the decision that we took behind launching Wrapped Bitcoin. Now, we took some major decision in terms of how to wrap Bitcoin on Ethereum that should be community-led, should be 100% verifiable, and it should be transparent. So all users should be able to verify where the Bitcoin enters the system, where it's sitting currently, and how it exits the system. And we're very proud to see people be able to use their Bitcoin in permissionless applications across the ecosystem. I think we're going to get into some of that later, but yeah.
Yeah, great. Could you talk a little bit about the different approaches that your respective projects are taking, either to bring Bitcoin to Ethereum and other smart contract platforms, or Muneeb, in your case, to bring smart contracts to Bitcoin?
Yeah, I can describe that a little bit. I feel like this actually goes to the heart of the design space. That let's compare, the Bitcoin side of the world. The core reason why we are even having a discussion about taking Bitcoin to another blockchain is because the original designers of Bitcoin effectively made the decision to keep the scripting language, the smart contract language on Bitcoin, very, very limited. It's by design, right? So it's for security. Bitcoin does not want to have like a big security attack vector at the blockchain level, right? So the Bitcoin script language is very, very limited. And that actually led to things like Ethereum. Like for people who are history buffs, like Vitalik back in the day actually even tried proposing full smart contracts on Bitcoin. That was never going to work in the Bitcoin core development circles. And then basically that was a fork in the road, and went off to propose Ethereum with full smart contracts. And we've kind of like seen, some of the potential security issues with having a full Turing complete language that you can do anything with these smart contracts. But as an industry, we have actually seen a lot more innovation. So we have kind of like learned to deal with the security problems, right? And I think overall it has been a net benefit to the industry that we have opened up so many different innovative use cases. But interestingly, I think this idea of like, can you bring smart contracts to Bitcoin has been almost like a holy grail in the Bitcoin ecosystem for a very long time. Like I've worked at this problem purely from a computer science perspective for several years. And interestingly, the broader kind of like perception in our industry is still that you can't have smart contracts on Bitcoin, right? And the reality is, actually you can, right? And the approach there is effectively just like people understand Lightning as a separate layer, where you can do fast transactions on Lightning and then just settle on Bitcoin. Similarly, you can have separate layers like stacks that can actually respond to Bitcoin transactions. So the smart contracts on the stack side, you can actually interact with them through normal Bitcoin transactions. So let's say there's a lending application. I keep my Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain, but I'm able to basically do a transaction that will be picked up by the smart contracts running on the stack side. And if my Bitcoin doesn't come back in this lending application plus interest, like automatically the collateral can be released to me in the stack smart contract. And then so it's almost like a read path, right? So the smart contracts can actually react to Bitcoin state. That itself is pretty powerful. And then there are open R&D areas that can you actually do the reverse of it? That can you enable the smart contracts on the stack side to actually write to the Bitcoin state? And we can already do that in certain more limited ways. I wouldn't go too much into the technical details of it, but what that enables is, so this is, for example, live today. If you want to do a native swap, right? So let's say you have Bitcoin on the Bitcoin main chain, and you want to swap that into an NFT, into some sort of a stable coin, or some other asset, you can actually just do that with the Bitcoin transaction, which feels like a aha moment that, oh wait, I just did a Bitcoin transaction and I'm interacting with Ethereum-like functionality, right? So that's the entire premise of the Stacks project, that I fully understand that a lot of the industry currently thinks that smart contracts can't happen in Bitcoin, but we have actually made like tremendous progress there, and people are building very, very interesting applications and things around the core technology.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you can't have smart contracts on Bitcoin, we have to introduce these second systems. And anytime we introduce a second system, we add new wrinkles to the security model. We add new ways that things can go wrong. For TBTC, we chose to use an economically incentivized and bonded custodian. And not just like one custodian, but thousands of custodians. And anyone can go and become a custodian by putting up a bond of Ether. And the wrinkle that TBTC adds to the security model is that if anything goes wrong and your Bitcoin is lost and just floats out there in the ether or is stolen, you end up with a greater value of Ether than your Bitcoin was worth. So you can never just add smart contracts to the Bitcoin base layer, but we can get like pretty good crypto-economic security around moving Bitcoin to other chains. But any second system, Lightning, Stacks, TBTC, any bridge is going to add new security model, new security assumptions, and is going to have new failure modes that you have to account for.
I think where WBTC comes into play is scalability. I think it was September of 2020 where we wrapped something like 600 million Bitcoin at a time. And if that were to be done on TBTC, I think we would have needed what, $900 million worth of ETH to be staked against it.
Well, the main problem with TBTC was the cost of capital.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the scalability problem did not allow TBTC to grow as much. And that's really WBTC's core strength, is to be able to allow people, not hold them back, wrap their Bitcoin, deploy it on Ethereum, and allow the ecosystem to move forward, and allow the Bitcoin community to be involved in this very vibrant ecosystem on Ethereum. I kind of touched on this earlier, but some of the design decisions that we made to reduce the security trade-offs as much as possible is to basically, BitGo, we cannot mint WBTC to ourselves. We do not own any WBTC. We do not trade it with people. We can only store Bitcoin and authorize a merchant's mint request. This is not a system like USDT or USDC where you would mint to yourself and just trade with people. This adds another layer of security, but also it adds a system where it's a lot more robust in terms of having multiple counterparties that can help liquidity flow into the system. WBTC is also completely transparent. You can go and look at all the addresses that are custodying the Bitcoin today. So that's an added layer of security for our users. And we're working on integrations, for example, with Chainlink to do an oracle from the Bitcoin network, send the information onto the Ethereum network, so smart contracts can always prove that the Bitcoin is backed 100% by, sorry, the WBTC is backed 100% by Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think one framework to have is if you take the lens of we are super early in crypto and developers are trying to build all sorts of interesting new things, right? So giving developers a bunch of different options with different trade-offs is actually a great thing, right? So in many ways, we were seeing a little bit of the trade-offs here that, hey, the wrapped approach might actually scale better, but then you are going through a custodial. Or if you're putting up collateral, maybe you're not trusting a custodial service, but then there might be some other limitation there. The interesting thing is that I personally love the fact that both options are available, right? And same with stacks, right? So you can talk about should Bitcoin go to smart contracts or should smart contracts come to Bitcoin? We are obviously in the camp that smart contracts should come to Bitcoin, but as a developer and as an industry as a whole, it's a great thing that all these options are available to developers, right? So the developers can actually play around with these trade-offs, and they can decide what makes sense for their application, what type of trade-offs that they're willing to make. And I think that should be kind of the broader lesson here, that at the end of the day, having all these different options available is really, really healthy for our industry.
It's interesting because as a developer, what we want is cryptographic security. We want to have a mathematical guarantee that the Bitcoin is secure. Because we can't get that, we settle for economic security. We settle for bonding. We settle for more proof-of-work-based things. And the third option is the custodial model, where you use a Chainlink and a BitGo, and they just handle everything for you. As a developer, we've settled for economic security, but users seem very comfortable settling for just custodial security, where some entity, some company holds all the Bitcoin and issues the tokens. And if you look at the market cap of each of our projects, I think that thesis is borne out.
Yeah, my next question was going to be about trade-offs, and I think you guys covered it really well. So let's go to the next one. So far, most of the adoption of Bitcoin on other layers has either been through stacks or through Bitcoin on Ethereum. What do you think about some of the other projects like Thorchain that attempt to facilitate the trade or DeFi on Bitcoin in a more native way?
I'm a massive fan of Thorchain. I think they're taking a very interesting approach. And I don't know if Chad's in the room. He was talking here yesterday. There you go, Chad. Massive fan of the project. And wish them best of the luck. And same with TBTC. I think it's a great approach. Same with RenBTC. And that is the future we would like to move towards, absolutely. And I think at the moment we are at a position where we're not comfortable putting 1% of Bitcoin there. And there's actually, the team at Thorchain actually they put a cap on top of what the amount that can be ported into the chain. So I think those are good safeguards to have as these systems develop, but that is definitely the future that we would all like to move forward. And in such circumstances, we would love to start disintegrating WBTC and make it more decentralized in such systems.
Yeah, I'll basically plus one that. I think it's a really interesting approach, especially focusing on making it more interoperable between different chains. They're actually not focused on just Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They're focused on basically connecting any different type of system that you can think of, and mostly going for this collateral-based approach. So there can be these banks that are basically backing some of these options, which is great. And going back to the framework of like giving developers more options, I think that is a great toolkit to have like as part of your set. In terms of like, I think there is some similarity in terms of like how Stacks deals with the Bitcoin chain, because I talked about this read access, right? Like our smart contracts can react to what's happening on the Bitcoin side. But then Stacks is effectively just focused on bringing smart contract functionality to the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? So we're not looking at, for example, trading Bitcoin against ETH or trading Bitcoin against like some other asset and connecting it to those different blockchains. We're talking about bringing Bitcoin NFTs or Bitcoin-based like stable coins or these liquidity protocols that actually use Bitcoin as an application and opening that up to the developers, right? So it's not sometimes I look at Thorchain as more like a middleware that it's connecting everything together, and it's kind of like great at doing just that. And I think that focus is really good. And I look at Stacks as kind of like a more of a, for the lack of a better way, like an Ethereum-like system that is connecting to Bitcoin, right? So and bringing Ethereum-like functionality to Bitcoin itself. And there are a bunch of developers who are super excited about that, right? Like, so again, it goes back to like having all these options for developers is a great thing for our ecosystem.
Great.
Yeah. This might sound kind of weird coming from me, especially given my prior opinions on this panel. I don't see much of a difference between Thorchain and WBTC, except that Thorchain developers are worse and they're anonymous. I would rather use WBTC than anything Thorchain puts out. The new things that I am excited about are Interlay's PolkaBTC, which uses the Xclaim model, TBTC v2, which is taking more of a risk insurance approach to economic security, and like Lightning and other layer 2s.
Got it. What have been the most popular use cases for wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum? And then Muneeb, would be great to hear from you. What are the types of applications that are seeing the most interest from developers and users on Stacks?
Go first. I think something about 40% of all WBTC is currently sitting inside of Aave, MakerDAO, and Compound. So I think the biggest use case is as a collateral to be able to borrow against your asset. And that is actually a use case, it's a financial application that I am the most excited about and passionate about. People across the world do not have access to collateralized lending and borrowing. Even middle-class Americans, the only exposure they get to that instrument is probably through mortgaging a house. Wealthy people throughout centuries have had access to this financial instrument, and it's a very powerful instrument in terms of protecting yourself against inflation, protecting your assets, and yeah, I think it's the holy grail of finance. It seems like such a trivial thing and one of the first things that we hit on with DeFi, but I I think that's one of the biggest use cases for WBTC today. And in my own humble opinion, I think Bitcoin is a fantastic collateral, and it's one of the biggest use cases. Bitcoin itself is to be a collateral.
Yeah, I would plus one that. I think there's a huge potential for using Bitcoin as collateral, and the numbers kind of like speak for themselves, right? Like if a bunch of the wrapped Bitcoin is being parked that way, that means that if you could do that with native Bitcoin, people will likely kind of like gravitate towards similar applications. So in terms of stacks, like the mainnet launch was like roughly 6-7 months ago. So I'll divide between what I'm seeing on the network today, and then what's kind of like in the pipeline, right? So what I'm seeing on the network today, I will talk about kind of like two biggest use cases. The one was a very surprising one, right? So it was an early team member that went off with this idea of trying to have this public-private partnership with city governments, right? So it's a project called City Coins, and it's a very community-driven. So Stacks has this interesting way of doing effectively like software-based mining. So you're not using any hardware for it. And they did a launch, like a mining-only launch for the city of Miami. So the project called Miami Coin. I wouldn't give like too much details of it, but think of that as like a way to do a public-private partnership with a city government, and there is a treasury of associated with the protocol, and the community basically just launched the project, right, without any involvement by the city government. But then the mayor of Miami came in and actually officially accepted the treasury, and I think Miami Coin is now worth like something like $1.2 billion or something like that. A bunch of the transactions on the Stacks chain are actually mining transactions for Miami Coin, and I wouldn't be surprised if they launch in like other cities and so on. So just like looking at the traffic, like the Miami Coin is definitely one big one. A bunch of the other stuff is actually all NFTs on Bitcoin. Like that is something that is clicking with people, because if you think about NFTs, they are valuable because of the ownership aspect and the provenance, right? So you can see the previous trades. You actually know, like, that this thing was minted at a particular Bitcoin block, and the provenance of the NFT is actually recorded in hashes, like on the Bitcoin blockchain itself. So if NFTs have value, then NFTs on Bitcoin should theoretically have like more value. And a lot of projects have caught on to that, right? So every other day I'm seeing like some sort of a new NFT launch happening, and that is leading to kind of like a bunch of traffic on our network today, right? So those are, I would say, the two biggest use cases on the network. What's in the pipeline is, so there's an independent Stacks accelerator that started, and their first batch has something like 25 companies in it, and I think they have raised like $2 to $4 million or something like that, and that cohort has new types of like stable coins where your collateral can actually earn Bitcoin rewards. So one of the interesting things about Stacks is that you can lock up Stacks to earn Bitcoin, right? So think of that as it has a native Bitcoin yield, right? And the yield is something like 10%. So what the developers are doing now is that they are programming against that abstraction layer of a Bitcoin yielding asset, right? So this stable coin is where your collateral is actually earning you Bitcoin yield, but you're minting a stable coin. So this project called Arcadico, I believe they're launching in the next couple of weeks, and then there is an entire lineup of these things, right? So part of me is like actually pretty intrigued by what happens on the network when like all 25 of these startups actually go live and all these different use cases are there. But it's definitely a very, very exciting time in our ecosystem.
Yeah, to kind of echo earlier points, the main thing we saw usage was collateralization and DeFi lending protocols. The other place we saw a lot of usage was in yield farming. A lot of TBTC got used to just port over Bitcoin and farm yield. The third and like somewhat unexpected thing we found out is that users of TBTC cared about keeping the specific Bitcoins that they put into the system. They wanted back the exact UTXO that they sent in. They wanted to maintain ownership of the specific Bitcoin and not like lose those. They were kind of irrationally attached to them. And that's really what makes Bitcoin such great collateral is, like a car, like a house, you would absolutely hate to lose your Bitcoins. A lot of people who are moving over these bridges are incredibly attached and feel like that is their life savings or their net worth. So yeah, again, collateral yield farming.
Thanks so much, guys. Great panel. Lots of diversity of opinions. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.